The old house creaked with stories, but none as strange as the one that began the day we rented out the attic room. The ad was simple: quiet room for a quiet traveler. We weren't expecting much, just someone to help with the bills. That's when he arrived. He called himself Mr. Sylvan. He was tall and thin, dressed in a long dark coat that seemed to drink the sunlight. His voice was a low rustle, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. He paid for a week in cash, his hands pale and his movements deliberate. He barely made a sound up there. We'd forget he was even in the house, until a floorboard whispered overhead. He was the perfect guest, really. He asked for nothing, kept to himself, and his presence was as faint as a forgotten memory. On the 7th day, he came downstairs, his single leather bag in hand. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said, his eyes dark and deep, holding mine for a moment too long. "I'll be on my way now." He placed the key on the hall table, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and walked out the front door. We watched him disappear down the street, a tall, dark figure swallowed by the afternoon haze. We breathed a sigh of relief. The house felt like ours again, or so we thought. That evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, I went up to clean the attic room. It was spotless, almost sterile. The bed was made, the window was clean, not a speck of dust in sight. It was as if no one had ever been there. I was about to turn and leave when I saw it. Sprawled across the floor, stark against the pale wood, was a shadow. A human shadow. It was impossibly dark, a void in the shape of a man lying on his back, one arm bent under his head. I flicked the light switch on and off. The light from the bulb cast my own shadow, which danced and moved with me. But his, his just stayed there, unmoving, unaffected by the light. My heart hammered against my ribs. I called for my partner, my voice a shaky whisper. They came up, and their face went as pale as mine. We stood there, staring at this impossible thing. It wasn't a stain. It had depth, a kind of textureless texture that seemed to absorb the light around it. We tried sweeping it, but the broom passed right through. We tried pouring water on it, but the liquid pooled around its edges, refusing to touch the blackness. It was a piece of night trapped in our attic. The guest had left, but he'd forgotten something. He'd forgotten his shadow. Life became a delicate dance around the thing in the attic. We closed the door and tried to forget, but its presence seeped into the rest of the house. A cold spot would appear in the hallway. We'd hear a faint rustling from upstairs when the house was supposed to be empty. Sometimes, late at night, we'd see a flicker of movement from the corner of our eyes, a sliver of that perfect darkness, just for a second, in a downstairs room. We were living with a ghost, but not of a person. We were living with the ghost of a shadow. We started losing sleep, feeling watched, feeling a quiet, heavy presence that we couldn't explain or get rid of. One afternoon, I found a small leather-bound book tucked under the loose floorboard beneath the shadow's head. It must have been his, Mr. Sylvan's. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages were filled with cramped, spidery script. It wasn't a diary. It was more like a collection of observations, notes on people. He wrote about their shadows, how they stretched and shrank, how they danced and followed. He described them as anchors, tethers that keep a person bound to this world. And then I found the passage that made my blood run cold. It spoke of a ritual, a way to shed one's anchor, to become untethered and walk freely between.
Oh.
Well, it didn't say where. To leave your shadow behind was to leave your baggage, your history, your humanity. The book described the shadow as a dormant echo, a recording of the person it was attached to. Explained that, given time, an abandoned shadow might begin to stir. It might start to remember. It might try to find its other half. Or if it couldn't, it might try to become whole again on its own. The rustling we heard, the cold spots. The shadow was no longer just a stain on the floor. It was becoming aware, and it was lonely. It was looking for a new host, a new person to anchor to, a new person to cast it. We weren't just living with a shadow. We were being haunted by a vacancy, a void that wanted to be filled. We had to do something. The book offered no solutions, only warnings. It seemed Mr. Sylvan had no intention of ever coming back for his shadow. He was free, and we were trapped with his cage. We decided we couldn't live with it anymore. We brought mirrors into the attic, dozens of them, hoping to confuse it or repel it with light. We surrounded the shadow with mirrors of all shapes and sizes, angling them to bounce the sunlight from the single window all over the room. The effect was dizzying. The attic filled with blinding light, a kaleidoscope of reflections, and for the first time, the shadow reacted. It began to writhe. The edges of the dark shape on the floor quivered and twisted, elongating and contracting like something in agony. It pulled away from the beams of reflected light, shrinking into itself. A low hum filled the room, a sound that vibrated deep in our chests. The shadow lifted from the floor, peeling away from the wood like a piece of drying paint. Hovered in the air, a three-dimensional patch of darkness, a hole in the world. It thrashed in the cage of light we had built, and we saw, for a terrifying second, the shape of a face in the blackness, a face with empty eyes and a mouth open in a silent scream. Then, with a sound like a final defeated sigh, it simply dissolved. It broke apart into 1,000 tiny specks of darkness, like soot, which then vanished into nothingness before they could even touch the floor. And then silence. The room was just a room again. The hum was gone. The coldness had lifted. We stood there, panting, surrounded by mirrors, reflecting an empty floor. We had done it. We had banished the shadow. The house felt lighter, cleaner. That night we slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The guest who never left was finally, truly gone. We boarded up the attic room after that. Some stories are better left untold, and some doors are better left permanently closed. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling tale. What would you have done if you found a shadow left behind in your home? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that explore the strange and unsettling, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. We'll see you next time.